Hi everybody, it's me, the Fetch, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there is Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Host Dr. Sasha Lessin, and welcome to another show. Today we have a very special guest, Stephen Myers, and let me read his bio. Stephen Myers is the author of two books, Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid and The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine. He's an author, lecturer, and independent researcher, and he has studied the Great Pyramid for over 20 years to understand how this ancient wonder of the world was built and why. His research included traveling to Egypt to conduct extensive on-site research at the Giza Plateau. Stephen Myers has written numerous magazine articles and given many lectures on the subject of the Great Pyramid, compiling his research into two books which provide a comprehensive and detailed explanation of how the Great Pyramid was built and why. He has also founded a nonprofit foundation dedicated to understanding how and why the Great Pyramid was built. The mission of this foundation is to read about these ancient... Okay, I'm going to give this to Dr. Leslie.
Oh, we're eager to hear what you have to say, Steve. She's turning off the telephone here. There she is.
Forgot to unplug it. Okay, sorry about that. So, let's see. The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine reveals the reason why the Great Pyramid was built, discarding the unworkable explanations offered by Egyptology. Stephen Myers provides a detailed and compelling explanation of the original purpose of this ancient, highly technical wonder. The Great Pyramid was not a tomb built using a ramp, but this ancient wonder was built using sophisticated procedure and was created to be a prosperity machine. So I have all this extensive bio on my website at aquarianradio.com, and we're going to bring on Stephen in just a moment. Did you want to say? Okay. Welcome, Stephen, to our show. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Janet, for having me on the show. It's a very wonderful honor.
Well, we're glad you're here. And my co-host is Dr. Sasha Lessin, and he's an anthropologist. So where to begin? There are many people who study the pyramids and have different theories on how they were built and why. So I guess the first part of this, at least the first half hour or so, let's focus on your theory. And if you want to take it away and start telling us a little bit about your research and what you discovered. Go for it.
Okay, great. Well, there's been a lot of theories about how the Great Pyramid was built. The most popular right now is the idea that it was built using a huge ramp. And Egyptologists tell that story, but Egyptology has yet to move the large stone, the weight of the largest stones of the Great Pyramid even 1 inch. And Egyptology has failed to even make a single casing stone in the manner that they say it was done. So it's interesting that the most popular theory presented is not substantiated using the scientific method. So there's a lot of alternative ideas, but my idea that is described in my books is that the Great Pyramid was built using water locks similar to those in the Panama Canal or the Erie Canal. And those water locks were used to bring stones on barges from the Nile River all the way up to the building site. And if you imagine the Great Pyramid under construction, the first stones that were set in place were the first level of casing stones, those precise stones that were covering the Great Pyramid. Those stones were cut to precision and also cemented together watertight. So if you have that first level of casing stones and fill the area it impounds with water, you have a large square pond on the Giza Plateau. And with a series of water locks from the Nile River up to that pond, you can move stones on barges all the way up to the building site and into that pond. And then the interior stones would be taken off of barges and set into the pond itself. And when that pond was filled up with stones, then the first level of the Great Pyramid would be completed. We have a video series on our website at thepump.org, which shows this process all the way from the initial stages of construction all the way up to setting the capstone in place.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How did they get these stones? These are huge stones, and we can't even lift them to this day. How did they get them into these barges in the first place?
That would have been accomplished in the quarry, but even 70-ton payloads are not as big as you would think. The Erie Canal was built in the 1830s. It was 4.5 feet deep, and the barges were made so that they could handle 70 tons. And 2 horses on a towpath.
The 70 tons aren't, I mean, the barges, I'm from Pittsburgh, so I've seen the barges.
Okay,
and
excellent.
They would put them on gradually. They would put 70 tons of coal on there or whatever they were.
Right.
So it wasn't like they lifted a 70-ton stone and tried to stick it on there. That's what my question is.
Okay. Actually, it's a much more sophisticated question than I expected. Yes, I believe that they use the power of buoyancy of water to both cut the stones and also to put the stones onto the barges. The video series describes how they can move a 70-ton stone off of a barge with ease. And so on moving stones off of the barge, I think that they move those 70-ton stones on barges between 2 supports. And the stone would overhang the barges enough so that when they added water into the barge would lower and set the stones on these supports. And I believe that that's how the stones were manipulated, if you will, using specialized barges and the powerful buoyancy of water.
All right. Well, let's continue. I'm just trying to figure that out. I'm trying to see that. Have they been able to do that today with the stones as large as these pyramid stones? Is there anywhere that we have done that? Modern humans have done that?
Well, like I say, 70 tons were able to be moved. 70-ton, a barge that had 70 tons of payload are able to be moved in 4.5 feet deep canals. But no, to move a 70-ton, a single, like say a stone, not in the period authentic manner, no, it hasn't been done because it costs money to to engage in the scientific method. But there's a scalability of using barges and heavy payloads that makes this idea of using barges a logical explanation for how the Great Pyramid was built. In fact, using water locks is the system of choice in the 21st century. It's 21st century technology. They are enlarging the Panama Canal so that it can take larger ships, and massive ships are the most massive object that we move in the 21st century. And in ancient times, in the valley of the Nile, those massive stones were the largest objects that they moved. And both cultures, I think, moved stones in a very similar manner.
Okay. So they got the stones from the quarry. How far away was this quarry that they were getting these stones from? Do you have an idea where the stones were coming from?
Most people agree that the casing stones, the very fine limestone stones of the casing stones, was quarried across the river. So everyone agrees that moving the stones across the river was accomplished using barges. Also, the largest stones that are in the king's chamber were moved from a quarry about 400 miles away. And most everyone that I know of agrees that those largest stones were moved on barges.
Are there any signs in the quarries of this excavation happening?
Well, there's quarries, and the quarries have been used since at least the time of the Great Pyramid. So the evidence of the quarries has been altered. But one excellent piece of evidence is that the stone from the casing stones is the same stone from the quarries. So that's how they've determined the location where the stones were moved from. So, that's actually not very controversial. Most everyone agrees about the location of the quarries.
Okay, and then the water, were there rivers during that time? Or is there evidence that there was these rivers flowing, that they were close enough?
Well, there's evidence.
I'm just kind of laying this out for our listeners.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah,
the people in the Valley of the Nile were excellent in the use of water, the control of water, and there's the canal that is attributed to Joseph of the Bible that was built. There's an Arab name for it. I'm not sure of that right now off the top of my head. But there's canals and the use of the Nile as a means of transportation. But using water locks, they would just have to connect the Nile essentially to the building site.
Okay. Any questions, Josh? Comments? Okay. Go ahead. Continue.
Well, anyway, they used, like I say, water locks to transport these stones on barges up to the building site. The main reason there's no demonstrations that have ever been demonstrated by the science of Egyptology is because they have the story that they tell. It cannot be done. They literally cannot move 2 stones in 4 minutes. And they say that working people were able to do that every 2 minutes, move a stone for 20 years at that rate. So, but Egyptology, the entire science, has never been able to move 2 stones in 4 minutes.
Why do the Egyptologists lie like that? Why do they keep asserting this silliness?
Oh, that's easy. My assessment is that to become an Egyptologist, you sit in a chair in a classroom and you're told stuff by people that have sit in a chair in a classroom. But you read books about Egyptology and they do not emphasize that they do not engage in the scientific method. They've never made a casing stone. They've never made even a single surface of one casing stone to the precision that the casing stones were made. I mean, the precision is about 1/50th of an inch over a surface of 5 by 7 feet. Can't be done using hand tools. But Egyptologists tell a story generation after generation, and it's become a tenet of a belief system. And Egyptologists have become essentially high priests that declare edicts as opposed to engaging in the scientific method and offering a hypothesis and substantiating it with demonstrative evidence, which is a demonstration. It's just strange that that's happening. That's actually happened before with another science, and that science was phrenology. It was the study of the bumps on people's heads and how that correlates to their psychology. And that science was taught in colleges, and there were people who were phrenologists and everything, but there was an issue with that science that made that science go away, and that issue was it could not withstand the rigors of the scientific method. You know, you couldn't demonstrate that the bumps on people's heads related to their psychosis. And Egyptology is in a similar crossroads. You know, Egyptology, although it's the richest science in the world, with their priceless artifacts, their museum space, benefactors, they are incapable of proving anything that they say about how the Great Pyramid was built. So I think that besides that, a lot of the other things they say are subject to debate, like the sequence of pyramid construction, certainly their purpose, even when and who built them, and the purpose. So I think that it's a science in crisis. It will still exist as long as there's paying customers to be students, and there are paying customers to buy their books, and paying customers to pay for advertisement for their TV documentaries. But as a scientific endeavor, I think, and other people think, that Egyptology is struggling.
Have you been persecuted or pressured because you differ from them in your exploration?
Actually, more of it is just a wall of silence. I mean, they won't even say that my books are wrong, because then they would have to mention my books. I mean, it's really interesting. But for in a grassroots level, people like, you know, especially young people that open my book and say, "Oh yeah, that's how they moved it," or "Oh yeah, that's why Egyptology can't demonstrate what they say." You know, there's been a tremendous amount of interest. I've been on 70 radio talk shows. The 2 books are out. A whole host of magazine articles are coming out that I've written and have been published. So the interest is very high. But in academic circles, archaeology and Egyptology, you know, nothing. Just a wall of silence.
When do you think the pyramids were built?
You know what I think? I think that there were people in the Valley of the Nile a long time ago that wanted prosperity. And prosperity is the same for everybody. For you, for me, for people that live in Yemen, for people that live in Central Africa, and everywhere. And prosperity is having enough food in your belly to get you through the day, and knowing that you and your kids will have enough food in their bellies tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And that's what the people in the Valley of the Nile wanted. And everywhere else. That's what the people in the United States wanted. Let me finish.
Go ahead. Okay, sorry.
And the way the people in the United States got that prosperity that you and I enjoy all the time, that you and I take for granted, is we built infrastructure. We built roads. We built schools. We built hospitals. We built schools. 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 We bu We built the Erie Canal that made New York City wealthy, the wealthiest nation on earth, because they could transport goods from the interior of the United States to the coast. We built hydroelectric dams. We built a road network. We built our power infrastructure. And all of that is an investment for prosperity. In the Valley of the Nile, they did the same thing. They built this great...
You there? Uh-oh. Hello? Sean?
You still there?
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Hi.
I
Anyway.
couldn't hear you anything. All of a sudden you were gone.
Okay, well, the High Aswan Dam is infrastructure for Egypt, and it has provided prosperity, and it is the biggest building in the Valley of the Nile. Well, in ancient times, they built this great big building, the Great Pyramid, to be infrastructure, and that infrastructure was a machine, and that machine provided prosperity by being a water pump.
So what kind of population existed at this time? And we don't know what time we're talking about yet. A long time ago, you're saying 10,000, 20,000? Because this was, the Bible says that humans only came around, 4,000 years ago. So we're looking at a different time frame than what the Bible's traditional Christianity is saying, which I always thought was kind of crazy anyway. So give me an idea what time frame, when this was built, and what was the population like? How many people were? How many people built it?
Yes, actually, when the Great Pyramid was built is not the focus of my research. People can debate that, but it hasn't been demonstrated that the civilization we know as ancient Egypt was able to build even the components of the Great Pyramid, let alone move them and set them in place. That burden is on the shoulders of Egyptologists, and they have failed in providing demonstrative evidence that the ancient Egyptians were able to do that. Some say the Great Pyramid was built pre-flood. Some suggest that it was built using high technology, and the source of that high technology could have been either somebody like Nikola Tesla figured out some high technology, or possibly alien technology. But the age of the pyramid, I think, is much older than Egyptologists claim it is.
Great. And then aren't there signs on the pyramid that there was a flood? There's markings indicating the level of the flood?
Some say that there is, like a watermark, if you will. That's quite debatable. I know inside the Great Pyramid there was a lot of sediment. So, and that was discovered by Flanders Petrie, that there was sediment inside the passages and chambers, which would support the idea that water was inside the passages and chambers.
So this was being built by, what kind of manpower or person power did they need to build this pyramid using the technology that you're describing?
I think that it would take a lot less people than the idea that Egyptologists have come up with thousands of people with strong back muscles dragging stones up a big ramp, and the ramp was of a bigger volume than the Great Pyramid. I think that they would use quite a small workforce compared to what you see on TV with people dragging. But are
you talking 100 people or 500 people or
probably
1,000 people?
Well, probably maybe 3,000 people, because you don't need a lot of back muscles to open and close water locks and that type of thing. I know that on canals, they would have two horses move a barge that had 70-ton payloads. So that's the purpose of using canals and water locks, is because it takes very little energy to move massive payloads.
Yes, on the barges on Pittsburgh, they have this little tiny thing pushing, these huge barges. They're like 6 to 12, long and wide. I just started being a huge deal, and it was amazing to see a little boat that's pushing all that weight.
It is amazing.
So I got in action, and that's what we do today. I'm still a little bit confused on how you got that big stone on there, but I'll let that go. But I wanted to know also, and I'll let you go free flow again, is, okay, so they built this for a city, and is there any indication that there was a population large enough to warrant this type of undertaking in that area? Is there like a city underneath, an ancient city underneath the current city?
Mm-hmm. Well, just because the Great Pyramid is built, that in itself acknowledges that somebody wanted to build it. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Everything that we built, we build for a reason. It could be the Statue of Liberty. It could be a hydroelectric dam. It could be a pencil. Everything that is built for a purpose, and that purpose is to be better off than it was before you built it. It could be a cathedral, right, or anything else. Well, we think that to build this massive water pump, the water was used for irrigation, was used to power heavy machinery, used to probably generate electricity in a number of different ways, was used for the creation of compressed air, and also a vacuum, and those things are all valuable for experiments for scientific purposes. I see the Giza Plateau more as a science center than a graveyard.
Great. Okay, let's see. Somebody is asking, why haven't you demonstrated working scale models as is done with other hydraulic engineering?
Right. We think that during construction, the subterranean chamber and associated passages cut into the solid bedrock below the Great Pyramid was used to be like a hydraulic ram water pump. And we are recreating that ancient technology. It takes, we have a nonprofit foundation. We have a facility that we are equipping with tooling and materials, and that is the purpose of our nonprofit foundation. And that we're working on it. We're redeveloping this ancient technology built by geniuses long ago, and we think that it is a very efficient type of water pump and will be valuable to provide an alternative to fossil fuel-based energy systems, for an alternative to hydroelectric generated electricity, and also to allow marginal farmland to be irrigated in a very inexpensive manner. So there's a lot of uses for this efficient water pumping technology, and the purpose of our foundation is to redevelop it now for our modern but very troubled world.
We were just at a conference, and there's a pyramid. Where was that pyramid built? Anyway, there's a pyramid built on the mainland somewhere. A private owner built a pyramid. In Chicago. And just the structure itself pulled water up from underneath the ground, and outside of in front of the pyramid is a little lake that was, so they contained it and made it into a lake. But I found that building the structure made water come up from underneath the ground. Have you ever heard of that?
I've actually done some preliminary research about that, but it is very interesting, and more study needs to be done on that. So it's just an interesting tie-in to the research we're doing.
Uh-huh. Okay, so I'll stop questioning for a few minutes. Sorry, I can hardly help myself. Go ahead with your presentation here, and what you want to convey to our listeners.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, the Great Pyramid is a great big building that's infrastructure for the civilization that built it. It wasn't a tomb for dead people. or a dead pharaoh, long open passages that are terminated by sliding stones. How is that an effective way to deter tomb robbers?
Right.
Nobody knows. But it all makes sense. It all makes sense to Egyptology. And with all of these passages and chambers built to extreme precision, and also built being both air and watertight, lends to the idea that it was more of a machine than just a tomb. So those are all things that are addressed in my books, Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid, and my second book, The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine. But anyway, the input of the Great Pyramid water pump was the descending passage, and the output was the King's Chambers vents. And the Great Pyramid, in effect, elevated water, and then from those vents, it could be delivered in a number of ways, it's described in my books, about to their point of use. And again, the water could be used for irrigation, experimental purposes, for scientific study, and the generation of both mechanical energy and electrical energy, including static electricity, which is in the 19th century was quite the rage for a whole bunch of purposes. Even for medical purposes, the electricity can be used. So there's a lot of interesting aspects of the Great Pyramid being a highly technical machine. And I think that ancient technology will have uses that we can adapt that technology to use in our modern world.
So you're trying to recreate this technology, and have you had access enough to the different interior parts of the pyramid to understand how the technology works? Can you recreate that even on paper?
Yes, we are conducting research and also in the process of doing experimentation. We have built components and subassemblies that correspond to passages and chambers of the Great Pyramid. And we are, like I say, equipping our research facility with tooling, including a 3D printer, which we are using right now to fund using crowdfunding. And that crowdfunding fundraising effort can be viewed at our website, which is www.thepump.org, thepump.org. And if people can go there and see what we're about, what our goals are, and some of our activities, and possibly if they are interested, they can contact us. They can become involved in any manner that they want to, either providing information, being co-researchers, advisors, well-wishers, that type of thing, or to just find out what we're about. So visit our website at thepump.org.
So this pyramid, you're talking about the Great Pyramid. What was the purpose of the Sphinx and the other pyramids in that area?
Okay, yeah, I was actually at the Giza Plateau a few years ago doing some on-site research, and the Sphinx is an amazing sculpture, as well as there are two other large pyramids on the Giza Plateau and some smaller ones. The purpose of the other two pyramids, I believe, are not water pumps. They have a different purpose. But the exact purpose of both of those pyramids, and they may not both have the same purpose, but it is under scholarly debate. So I'm unsure what the purpose of those other two pyramids are. But I don't think either one of those were built to be water pumps. I believe that the water from the Great Pyramid could have possibly been used to build both of those other pyramids. That's a possibility.
I have a question from Zapod. Is there any evidence to show that the Great Pyramid as a machine could work on an interplanetary level, for example, as a transmitter?
We all have the same direct physical evidence. All researchers have the same direct physical evidence to examine and to interpret. I don't think that the Great Pyramid transmitted anything anywhere other than water, and I think that it moved water from the base of the Great Pyramid up to the exits of the King's Chamber vents. That's my opinion. But to transmit like microwave energy or anything like that, I would say that no, I don't think that was the purpose of the Great Pyramid at all.
So you're saying it was for water and generating electricity, energy? Is that what you said?
Yes. The largest structure in North America is the Grand Coulee Dam. It's a hydroelectric dam on the Columbia River in central Washington state, and it's big. It does generate a lot of electricity, but its primary purpose, this largest structure in North America, its primary purpose is to pump water for irrigation. Most of us eat apples from central Washington that are irrigated by pumped water. So and other fruits and vegetables. That hydroelectric dam turned central Washington into a paradise instead of just a dry desert area. So I think that in a similar fashion, although the Great Pyramid operated in a different manner than a hydroelectric dam, but still the Great Pyramid was a large infrastructure that provided prosperity for the civilization that built it.
Okay. There's someone that asked, I didn't quite get the whole question. I'll just read it and it makes sense to you. It's an interesting theory that you mentioned scalability. Why haven't you demonstrated working scale models as you've done with other hydraulic engineering, 1 to 256 or less, and progressively change scale by a factor of 2, 1 to 128, 1 to 64, 1 to 32, 1 to 16, etc. Very cheap to do. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes. Some of that is some technical questions. The way it operates is by the volume of the water in some of the chambers. So if you reduce the scale to half scale, then you've reduced the volume in the chamber by 4. It's similar to if you scale a horse up to 10 times the size. If you scale a horse up, then it'll be, let's say, twice as big, but it'll weigh 4 times as much. So there's a scalability issue with a lot of things. Some things more so than others, but that's what we're doing. You know, we are doing some experimentation, and we are developing a prototype. So I'm glad that he's interested in that, and that's what we're doing. Send us an email if you have.
I'm sorry. Finish your sentence, and then
I hope he sends us an email and with his thoughts, and we can collaborate, and he can, we can get in a much more detailed explanation through email than over a radio show. But yeah, that's what we're doing. That's the purpose of our research. It's a similar question to ask Egyptologists. Why haven't you made a casing stone? Ask them. If you're going to ask me that question, ask the Egyptologists. Why do you put that in a book if you can't do it? Well, we started a nonprofit foundation to do that and to figure out the genius of the ancient builders of the Great Pyramid. And that's not as easy as it seems. I mean, it sounds like, putting some PVC pipe together and getting some other stuff at Home Depot. It's a little bit more to it than that. if it's all that easy, why didn't the builders of the Great Pyramid build a bunch of little tiny ones? Well, there's some issues of scale, so there's a lot to it, and it is funding intensive for custom fabrication and that type of thing. So that's why we're getting the 3D printer for some fabrication and that type of thing. But research is ongoing.
So there was a report from Linda Moulton Howe on Whitley Strieber's Unknown Country that they have a working pyramid with whistleblowers up in Alaska, and you can search for it on YouTube. And I invite you to watch it. It's very fascinating. Whitley Strieber and Linda Moulton Howe. So that one's still working, and of course the government is repressing it because our governments don't really want this technology out there because they like the fossil fuel system because that's their profit, that's their power and control. So with that in mind, is the pyramid missing something and it's not working? What made it stop working? Why does it still work to this day, performing its function? There are some ruins in South America where the water is still flowing. It's like thousands of years later. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, about the report of the Alaskan pyramid, I'm familiar with some of those reports, and I wish that there were more information. There's like a picture taken from a mile away of a pointed snow-covered mountain or whatever, and there's some reports of eyewitness testimony, that type of thing. I sure wish that there was some more information. I know it's tantalizing, that information, just as well as there have been some reports of pyramids in the Bahama area, underwater, and that type of thing. I support more research in every area, including the pyramids on Mars that there has been reports of. And I'm in favor of more research needs to be done on that. Instead of more research on making smarter bombs, let's make more research on understanding these ancient technologies and the motivations for building these structures. But the reason why the Great Pyramid doesn't work right now is that it is broken. The ceiling stones, the largest stones of the Great Pyramid, in the ceiling of the King's Chamber are cracked, and that caused a massive air leak in that chamber, and it is not operational. And then, of course, through the centuries, the Great Pyramid has been damaged mainly by the hands of mankind in their wanton destruction, looking for golden treasure or mummies or something that they can make some money off of. There's places that are dug out and destroyed. Both the king's and queen's chambers had holes dug in the floors of each chamber, and the pit in the subterranean chamber has been dug a lot deeper than it originally was, as well as the casing stones have been removed. The Great Pyramid made a wonderful quarry, and to rebuild Cairo after an earthquake. So it's a machine that's broken. There were stones in the antechamber between the Grand Gallery and the King's Chamber that are gone. There are slots left for the stones to move on. We believe that was like a valve to help operate the Great Pyramid water pump, but all of that's been destroyed now, and it doesn't work.
So are there any reports of in antiquity of its purpose and it working at some point? Where's the Sumerian, but what have you discovered?
Excellent question. There are some reports that are very tantalizing. There's not a lot of information from ancient writings about the Great Pyramid, none from the culture of the Egyptian civilization about how it was built. There's no images to depict how it was built. There's no images of the barges that were used to move the stones of the Great Pyramid, nothing. But when Herodotus, the 5th century BC historian, traveled to Egypt, he described the Great Pyramid as being surrounded by water. It was an island surrounded by water. There was a wall around the Great Pyramid that we think impounded water, and it was used in both the building procedure and also as part of how it operated as a water pump. But that's very interesting. The casing stones.
What year was that again? Can you say that again? What year did that?
There was a wall around the Great Pyramid. It survived up until the 18th century. Some of the
18th?
early 18th century. That wall is acknowledged by everyone to have existed. Early drawings of the Great Pyramid, when the French savants went over, depict that wall around the Great Pyramid. The wall is evident, or it's gone now, but it was evidence. You can interpret that wall like the Egyptologists do and say, oh, that was to keep the unwashed masses away from the pharaoh's tomb. That's an interpretation. I have an interpretation. That wall was used to impound water to help the Great Pyramid function as a water pump. So there was a sediment inside the passages of the chambers, and and the casing stones were cemented together watertight. That's not to keep this pharaoh's soul from leaking out. That's
right.
Not to keep the Egyptian rain from all that pesky rain in Egypt from soaking into the king's chamber. The reason why the casing stones were cemented together watertight was to impound water in the process used to build the Great Pyramid. And that process is described in great detail in our video series at thepump.org.
I was listening to a YouTube and it said that the inside the pyramid they lined the tunnels with granite, and they thought that was for conductivity and creating the energy. This is the theory that was used for energy, but I think it's not mutually exclusive. You could have used the pyramid for many different functions. It's a huge building. So, what do you know about the granite lined tunnels?
There are some. Most of the Great Pyramid is limestone, and the area that it's built on is solid limestone bedrock. There is some stones that are granite. Some of the largest stones of the Great Pyramid are exquisite granite moved 400 miles, which would be upstream, which is down on the map, from the quarries. And those, some people say that they have quartz in them, and you can, generate electricity by their vibration and that type of stuff. But I think that they was used to be a strong component in various aspects of some of the chambers.
Right. And so this structure, is it in alignment with other structures on the Earth and with other things in space? Let's look at the configurations of alignment.
There are ideas that the Great Pyramid vents point to stars. And that is a very simple explanation of the Orion correlation theory. And if you introduce the variable of infinite time, you can, in effect, dial back the stars, dial back the sky so specific stars are pointed to by the vents of the Great Pyramid. But that's fine. That's a correlation. But there's no evidence specific to the Great Pyramid. There's no evidence that indicates that there was any intent for any correlation to be significant.
Well, it seems that from something I saw or one of the presentations that as the sun rises and it comes to a certain configuration, same as Stonehenge. And so that indicates there's an alignment with something to create this phenomenon of the sun coming through at a certain point. So, can you help me with that?
Yes. The Orion correlation theory is currently quite popular with a lot of people, and with the ideas of correlations and things aligning to other things for some specific reason. But in a logical sense, a correlation has to be validated by causation. And if you have a correlation that there's no evidence of for causation, then if you think that the correlation is significant, then that is an act of faith, which is fine with me. But there's no evidence that the Great Pyramid vents are actually supposed to point to stars. There is no thing. The streets of Manhattan line up with the sun, and they call that Manhattan hinge. That is a correlation. That is alignment. It cannot be denied. There's pictures of it and everything. But were those streets intended to line up with the sun? Or is it significant?
Well, we don't have the ancient writings. We do have some ancient writings from the Sumerians and the Anunnaki. You want to address that?
Okay, Steve, I hope you don't take this wrong, because but I do have some alternative hypotheses based on my studies of Sumerian records that they said was given them by the Anunnaki gods.
Hey, great.
After the flood of 9,703 BCE, one of the purposes of locating this artificial mountain occurred where to mark off where you would turn coming in from Mount Ararat across Baalbek, and then you turn and you go to the spaceport in the Sinai, and that megaliths all over the world were moved by sonar devices such as you have in the Coral Castle in Florida, and in Rapa Nui. The natives say that these guys had these ice cream cone shaped things, and they commanded the great stones, the moai, to be in their places. And all over the world, the megalithic structures that were built by, they call it the followers of Horus, or these seven shining ones, were always over water, and they tapped the piezoelectric variation in the Earth's vibration, which is greatest a few hours before dawn, and that this energy is what they basically done has said. You put hydrochloric acid and hydrated zinc, and you combine them over the water pump, and it sends a microwave up, which is facilitated by other kind of computer devices, crystal devices, and that the destruction in a temple was when one of the pyramid wars, when Ninurta, the champion of Enlil, was chasing Marduk, and Inanna was chasing them. And after they conquered, they broke all what they couldn't take away, and they removed a lot of stuff, including the electrum goodstone on top. So anyway, this is a series of alternate hypotheses, and I was very indeed hesitant to bring all these up during your show, but my wife was boss in this house.
Hey, great. No doubt there's a lot of ideas. There's a lot of ideas about that, about ancient wars and electrum and all of this other stuff, and that's wonderful. And we all of us researchers and people that have an interest in this are like doctors, and we offer an opinion. When a patient comes in, the patient is the person that decides what decision they're going to make. And what I suggest to everybody and is to get a second opinion. You have an opinion, you have an idea, an explanation of the direct physical evidence. Well, so does a lot of people, and it's not for us as professionals to decide. It's for the layman. It's for the layman. Just like in a court of law. You got lawyers that are the experts, but it's the people that are jurors that make the decision of what they think is right or wrong. And we're all just presenting our information.
Well, there's one other thing that you could directly give me some feedback, and a lot of people, including Freddie Silva, have mentioned that there's a distinct feeling in all these sacred sites, partly by the mental set that people have, but also by the actual measurement of the type of energy, the telluric field within the pyramid that makes you able to dissociate from your usual concerns and meditate and go into a spiritual state. And I wonder if you experienced anything of that when you were in the pyramid.
I was actually in the pyramid when we were filming a documentary, and we had a license to film the documentary and had the Great Pyramid to ourselves for over 2 hours, and it was wonderful.
I thought we'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, we'll talk about your experience in the pyramid. We'll be back. Back in 5.
We'll be right.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com with your host, Janet Kerr Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson. And before we get back to our incredible show with Stephen Myers, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to the donation button on our website at freedomslips.com and please make a donation. Whatever you can afford to donate would be greatly appreciated, $1, $5, $15, $20. We thank you very much for your donation. Your donations help us continue to bring you shows like this. So we were talking about Stephen Myers' experience in the temple. And can you explain, Dr. Lesson, what is a telluric field?
What happens is throughout the Earth, there's vibrations that occur, and the activity is greatest along fault lines, like those that go through Karnak, France, for example. The megalithic structures there are where there's a maximum movement, and where there's variation in the amount of this electromagnetic energy, it allows for electricity to be generated and the reason that it's seen by Silva and others as meditative is that the water, which is drastically charged at those few hours before dawn, is especially powerful, and the magnetite in the granite, and especially in the limestone and so forth, is very sensitive to conductivity. And in the human body, there's all this magnetite too, and so that you, as well as the megalithic structure in which you're meditating, is at a different vibration. And there's circles usually around the hinges and around things like the pyramid, the walls, that keep out the mundane and let just the practitioners in the old days, the priests who got to do it, especially have this vibration. And if they were meditating on the stars, because their work's lining up with the stars, they would have thoughts about if that's where their God said they came from. And I wasn't there, so I don't know, but this is what people are saying.
So did you have any kind of, lots of people say they have spiritual experiences when they're at the, especially the Giza temple. Have you had any type of experiences when you were there?
Well, when I was there, it was impressive in virtually every way possible, but I didn't have a religious experience or feel any electrical vibrations or anything like that. I was certainly in awe of people who are related to us, our ancestors, who were able to move that massive amount of stone. The Great Pyramid weighed greater than the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, and they were able to move that weight and assemble this magnificent project with great precision. I was in awe of it as an engineering project, but not necessarily as a temple or a worshiping area or anything like that.
Okay, wow.
One thing I would also am interested in is we have something called Brown's gas, which you can apply to a stone, and what you get is a chemical bonded cement, not just an aggregate like we use. And Peah, who was an Anunnaki, evidently was reputed to have used that in making Angkor. So you have these mile-long single stones, but they were constructed by melting down and then letting the aggregate harden in place. And I just wonder if there's any evidence of either those things or the ties that Chokers has mentioned, where there's holes drilled in successive stones and then metal poured to double the bond and hold in earthquakes. I wonder if you have anything like that.
Well, my understanding is there's certainly some controversy of the what the stones were made out of. Some say that they were poured aggregate, if you will, but there's also a lot of machining marks on the stone. So if you have to pour them, you wouldn't think you would need to have to machine them. So there's controversy about that. But to me, it's more important how they moved that massive amount of material, more so than what they are made out of. Certainly, Brown's gas is a controversial technology in modern times, and I think that it is quite possible that in ancient times, even the times of the Great Pyramid, that Brown's gas was an available technology. I know that there is those little jars that are the Baghdad battery is what they're called, and people in the real world, real scientists, actually recreated these little jars made of clay and recreated them with the copper tube and the iron pin in them, and then added like grape juice, and they were a battery. You could actually measure it, and it produced about 1.5 volts, depending on the electrolyte. But they really work, and it's I think a very conclusive type of evidence that ancient people had some very high technology. And Egyptologists, oh no, that's something to do with some religion or whatever. So yes, I think electricity and even Brown's gas, which is quite an interesting subject, was available in ancient times.
Thank you.
Okay, and a couple questions from our listeners. Zaphod asks, do you believe there are pyramids on Mars?
There's certainly some pictures that indicate that there could be, and my first response is that we need more research. We need, why not? Why not send people up there specifically to look at, there's also a face on Mars that people have considered to be very important. Why not look at that? Why, let's study that. Let's find out what's really going on. It'd be nice to find out more about the pyramid, the so-called pyramid in Alaska. So, instead of giving subsidies to oil companies, let's use that money to gain real knowledge in this new 21st century we live in.
Well, yes, definitely. There were pyramids on Mars, and we could prove that. It would show that there was some extraterrestrial correlation with who may have built these pyramids. So that would be one thing. Vibes asks, did you have your own glyph reader on the trip, and who? And was anything a surprise on your trip?
Did I have my own what now?
Glyph, Glyph, glyph reader.
Well, there's no glyphs on the Great Pyramid to be read, so we didn't need a glyph reader.
Well, explain that. I guess people think that there's glyphs on the.
I think there's hieroglyphs.
I think there's hieroglyphs.
Yeah, there are hieroglyphs in the Valley of the Nile. Most everything is just plastered with hieroglyphs. The ancient Egyptians wrote all over temples and tombs, but there are no formal hieroglyphs in the Great Pyramid. There are some quarry marks that are quite controversial in nature for several reasons. But formal hieroglyphics, there aren't any inside the Great Pyramid. You want to know why?
Were the hieroglyphs, do you think, added on by later generations, or were they by the builders?
There's none in the Great Pyramid.
Not in the Great Pyramid, but in the valley, right, around the surrounding area.
Probably the builders of some of those temples and tombs. Probably they put the hieroglyphs in there. But why not inside the Great Pyramid?
Yes, that's a good question. Go ahead, Josh.
I'll offer an answer. The answer is because it was important to the builders of the Great Pyramid not to put any hieroglyphs inside the Great Pyramid. It was a machine. It was going to be filled with water. You don't need any hieroglyphs. There aren't any writing inside the cylinders of automotive engines. Don't need any. It's a machine.
Oh, and the second part, and were there any surprises on the trip? Again.
Yes, everything on the trip was a surprise. It is marvelous to travel to Egypt. Everything about it was interesting. When we landed in Egypt, they had smoking inside the terminal, and that was different than I don't think they have it now, but back then, just when we first landed, it was interesting. There was just the people, the landscape, the animals, the vegetation, the sounds in the streets, the food. It was all marvelous. I suggest to everyone, even in these times, if you get a chance, go to Egypt. I mean, there's no place like it in the world. It's marvelous, and the people. You see things on the news, but when we were there and now, the people were tremendously friendly. Egypt has been accommodating tourists since the time of Herodotus. And they were just tremendous, and some cultural differences were quite interesting, but the accommodations were tremendous. The money exchange was such that everything was cheap, if you will, if you can say that. I suggest anyone go to Egypt. It was just a tremendous experience. But some of the surprises was that when we got to the Giza Plateau, it was like devastation. There was a lot of, if I can say this, there was a lot of trash everywhere, and the Giza Plateau has been thrashed by everybody since the ancient Romans and before. So the devastation, it's not a pristine structure. It's not, it's just hard to say that, but it's been through the mill, if you will. But it's still just a wonder. It's a wonder of the world to go see. It's something that is not just remarkable, but it's full of mystery. It's a technology that we can't reproduce. Scientists, like Egyptologists, consider themselves to be experts, yet they can't do it. It's like an expert of cows jumping over the moon. They talk about it in literature. No, seriously. There's literature you can read about cows jumping over the moon. There's myths and stories. But someone might say, hey, but what about cows jumping over the moon? Wouldn't that be a cheap way to put a satellite up there? Oh, well, we can't demonstrate it, but we're scientists. We teach this stuff in college about cows jumping over the moon. Yeah, but can it be demonstrated using the scientific method? Well, get out of here, kid. You bother me. That's how absurd Egyptology is. But the surprises is I don't know if I love to travel. Been to Paris, been all over Canada, Mexico, a number of other places, even beautiful Hawaii I've been to. So, but I recommend traveling to Egypt. I think Cairo, if I can say this without getting in trouble, I think Cairo is safer than Chicago. So I hope I don't get in too much trouble for that. But Oh yeah, it's and just like the news is not necessarily a reflection of reality, if you will, and I wouldn't. I would go again. Funding is a struggle, of course. What?
Oh, Sash wants to say something.
Well, just that the hypothesis that they might have been cows escaping mutilating grays that were jumping.
Oh yeah, there you go. That settles it.
But from the Sumerian data that I've been studying, it says that Ningishita, who's later known as Thoth, built the three smaller pyramids as a model, and Lil, his father, his grandfather, was so pleased he let his face be the original face on the stone lion, as they called it. But then when his half brother Marduk or Ra kicked Thoth out, he chipped off Ningishita or Thoth's face and put Osiris's face there. Osiris had been killed by his brother Seth, but probably revived. And anyway, that's the story that the Sumerians said that the gods dictated to them.
So the other thing I wanted to say is that we have a pyramid here on Maui in Haleakala, right? There's a pyramid in Haleakala.
You're calling it a pyramid, Jan. I climbed that thing. It's a pyramid-shaped rock.
No, there's another structure that I don't think you saw the pictures of, and then there's supposed to be a pyramid in on which other one? Kauai. But there are pyramids all over the planet. There's a big pyramid in Bosnia. There's one in China. How does this tie in? Are these all? What's the purpose of the other pyramids? Do they periodically have ones for water? Do they have to be a certain height if they're being used for water pumps? Do they have a smaller one when you have a city of 10,000 and a larger one for a city of 100,000? What are your ideas on that?
Oh well, there's a lot of pyramids all over the world, and but again, the focus of my research is how a specific building, the Great Pyramid, was built and why it was built. So I'm certainly open to the idea that various pyramids, even in the Valley of the Nile, have been built with different designs, different materials, different levels of craftsmanship. Different sizes, and probably with different purposes. So there's a variety of reasons, I'm sure, across the globe that pyramids were built. But it's interesting. But the people ask, what's the reason that it's a pyramid shape? If you ever go to see a large hydroelectric dam, some are curved, but a lot of them are flat. The front side, the spillway, if you will, is flat and at an angle, about like the side of a pyramid. And if you had 4 hydroelectric dams kind of back to back to impound water in the middle, it would be like 4 sides of a pyramid. And our video series at our website, thepump.org, shows how those 4 dams can make what appears to be like a pyramid, and that is the purpose of that pyramid, was to impound water during construction.
So you don't think that the pyramid shape is okay? It's got different uses all over the planet, and it's all pyramid shaped. You have them in South America. So you don't think there's something significant with that shape?
Like a universal purpose? I do not think that there's a universal purpose. There are different shapes. Some are like the step pyramid or the bent pyramid in Egypt, and are pyramids, but they are different shaped, if you will. The pyramid of the sun and the moon over there in Mexico are made of, if I can say this, rubble and fill, so the design is different. Some people think that it has to do with like exotic energy systems or vibrations, or to meditate or whatever. But and they can have their ideas, but specific to the Great Pyramid, I think that the reason that it was a pyramid is during construction they impounded water, and it was built level by level using water locks. So that's what I think the specific purpose for that specific pyramid shape is.
When you do your models and your design, are you going to use the same shape, or are you going to use a different shape?
No, the shape was the purpose of the shape was to build large infrastructure and to be able to move a massive amount of stones to great heights. If I may add, the Erie Canal was able to move the weight of the Great Pyramid in cargo higher than the height of the Great Pyramid in a period of 2 years. So it's using canals and water locks is actually very fast. But when our prototype will use, like the gentleman suggested, PVC pipe and polypropylene containers of various sizes and scales, using valves and that type of thing. Some off-the-shelf parts, but some that are some very expensive custom fabrication. You can't go down and buy $29 worth of parts from Home Depot and rebuild the ancient technology of the Great Pyramid. So no, we're not going to have the shape. We're going to have, our intent is to build a water pumping device that can be used ultimately in homes or in communities that can be built locally with cottage industries or local technicians, both here in the United States and also in the third world, and disseminate this technology in that manner, and that pumped water will have many uses. In the undeveloped world will be primarily irrigation. Secondary would be the generation of electricity. In the developed world, primarily the generation of electricity. So it'll give us an alternative to hydroelectric power, which has some adverse environmental impacts, and also, of course, fossil fuel-based electrical generation and even nuclear power generation, which is obviously very adverse environmentally.
Steve, there's a whole bunch of problems that are coming up with the origins of the Nile and the countries who are laying claim to that water and not letting, and Egypt is threatened militarily that you're not going to slow down our water. And I wonder, now that Sisi is in, perhaps things are going to be a little bit calmer. But what's your assessment about the future of the Nile, which is what really runs the pyramids?
Well, the future of the Nile is under debate. Water will be the next oil. Oil is a resource that our civilization runs on. We don't run on electronics or the transistor or anything else. Our civilization runs on oil, and water is the next resource that will control the world. And the Nile, it's not bad when you have, let's say, 10 million people live in Egypt, but when you have 500 million, then there's an issue with water. They are using the Nile water to be irrigated by using the High Aswan Dam, and it has greatly increased productivity for the Nile Valley through year-round irrigation. And the Nile is going to be changed from what it was. There's no yearly inundation anymore to provide fertilizer. So much of the electricity from the Nile, from the High Aswan Dam, is used to create fertilizer, believe it or not, right there in Egypt. But there is going to be more and more stress related to the water of the Nile, who uses it, and how it's used. That's the same in the Euphrates River in that area, and also here in the United States in the Columbia River. There's a tremendous conflict about using the water for the fish, or do you use the water for irrigation, or do you use the water for the generation of electricity? and all three of those interests are fighting politically over the water in the Columbia River. There's also a movement to take water from the Columbia River all the way down to Los Angeles, believe it or not. So, and that is a force to be reckoned with. Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, has more political power than almost all of the states in the western half of the United States put together. So if they want water, they're going to get water, and they've done it for 100 years. So there are issues with water. If we can use water, reuse water, if you will, to generate electricity in a decentralized manner, that would be good. If we can use water to pump, if we can pump water in a way that we don't have to dam a river to make electricity, then that would be good. This alternative technology that we think the Great Pyramid was built for can be redeveloped. We can take a lot of the stress off of the demands on water throughout the globe.
Do you already have a prototype of the local pump that you want to create?
We are actually in the process of building. It's not a prototype. It's a proof of concept model. A prototype is like the first of what you're going to mass produce, but we're building a proof of concept model. But we want to design it and build it in such a manner that we can provide the plans for free over the internet or anywhere, and then people.
Wow.
Yeah, we're a nonprofit humanitarian organization. We're not making any money, but we are going to provide that for free. Just put the plans on the internet, and then people can adapt it to what the materials they have. Like in some countries, they have barrels that they can weld together. Other places, they can buy off the shelf large polypropylene containers and then use, check valves or whatever. So that's our goal. We are, funding has been a struggle. If I can tell you, we've had people that want to get involved to invest with us to control patents of what we're doing. But this technology will be very difficult to patent because even though it's not recognized, it's been in the public domain for 2,000 years since the Great Pyramid has been breached and people have walked through the passages. So it's going to be difficult to get a patent, but that has been a difficulty getting the funding to really develop this in a big way, if you will. We're just kind of a grassroots organization.
One problem is that I see is that once you get something that's energy efficient and costs less and isn't polluting and so forth, the clandestine government seizes it up and says, for national defense, since we're dependent on our oil technology and automobiles, you can't let people know about this. I don't know if you've run into any kind of obstruction from those who are protecting the moneyed interests. That it seems like a big threat with almost any really good invention nowadays.
I've had both obstructionists, if you will, in the academic community, to be sure, but I've had some strange. I'm not a conspiracy theory guy. I'm just a humble researcher that wants to understand the technology of the skyscraper we call the Great Pyramid. But I've had some strange things on my computer, some odd things going on, had some odd phone calls. So I don't know. I wish I could say, but it's been interesting. It's been an interesting adventure the last few years.
I have a question. I have a bunch of questions from Zaphod. He's firing them at us, but let me do this one. Have you seen the Carillion photography of the helix energy coming from the top of the pyramid, showing the link between the human energy field?
Yeah, I've seen some photographs, yes, but I haven't seen that developed that idea into any concrete technology that helps people. Have you?
Don't know.
Well, the technology is partly mental set. If you think you're going to have a spiritual experience, you go in there with other people to meditate and maybe take a psychedelic, you will have a spiritual experience in all probability. So we don't know what causes it other than your mental set. But there is this hypothesis that it's the telluric energy, the variation of electric energy, which goes along certain grid lines, which is higher in certain places than other places. That's different than the energy outside, and that people that tune into it and go into a space with that set get high, and they can access what they think is their past lives and their connection with the star people.
That's one theory.
Yeah, I'm familiar with some of that. That's for sure. You know, there's that ISIS group over there in the Middle East. I'm sure you've heard of them. Yeah, horrible. We've all seen the videos, you know, and there's no use describing them and everything. But wherever they go, they destroy what they consider to be pagan temples and that type of thing. Those great big Buddha statues, you know, over there.
Yeah. Oh, that was horrible in Afghanistan. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, they're just, you know, to me anyway, they're a wonderful thing. They're an ancient artifact. You know, and it's marvelous to look at. You know, it doesn't bother me. But those people have, if nothing else, they have a sense of purity. You know, they want to keep things pure in whatever their mind is, and destroy those pagan symbols, you know, places of worship and that type of thing. Now, the ISIS organization took control of an oil field. They didn't destroy it. You know why? It's just an oil field, okay? It's an oil field. There's oil under there, and there's technology and stuff to extract the oil. Well, what's going to happen if ISIS or some other group with similar ideas, similar mindset, what if they get control of the Giza Plateau? What are they going to do? What do you think they're going to do? They're going to destroy.
They're going to do the same thing they did in Iraq. They're going to steal everything and break everything.
Everything they can. The people that stole stuff out of the museums were just people trying to get food in their belly by selling artifacts. It's been going on for thousands of years. But ISIS will systematically destroy the Great Pyramid because people use it for religious or sacred purposes. Now, if the Great Pyramid was considered to be, hey, it was a machine that they built in ancient times to help irrigate and, you know, to generate electricity, they wouldn't destroy it. So my contention is the people that even today you can take sacred journeys to the Great Pyramid and go inside and hum and worship or contemplate your navel or whatever, it will be consistent with ISIS to destroy the Great Pyramid because of people using it as a temple.
Well, I thought it was just a burial ground. Isn't that the official story for the ISIS people? It's not a sacred temple, it's a burial ground.
That's the official story of the Egyptologists. But what matters, not the official story, what matters is how it's being used. Those temples, those Buddhas that they destroyed, they were rock. Yeah. They were just rock. But it's how they were used. And if the Great Pyramid is used as a temple for this New Age worship, it will be consistent with ISIS to destroy the Great Pyramid. They will make Great Pyramid gravel. They will use a large backhoe and a rock crusher and turn it into Great Pyramid gravel, and then they'll gravel the roads to the mosques.
Question from Zaphod: why does the pyramid line up with all the all the mathematical matrix ley lines around the world?
Okay. Well, there's these ley lines and everything. I would suggest to you that the ley lines were possibly charted to line up with the pyramid instead of the pyramid built to line up with the ley lines. That's a possibility. It's just like any correlation, you have to have a causation to validate it. There's a correlation.
Right.
There's a correlation between, like I said, the streets of Manhattan lining up with the sun. There's the spikes on the Statue of Liberty's crown. They all point to stars. But was that their intent to have some significant correlation? Well, we have to have something to corroborate it with. There's a correlation.
We have ancient writing that says that that's what it was. There was a correlation.
Right.
And we do have some information.
Well,
I see your point. We do have
the pyramid you mean like the pyramid text and that type of thing? Is that what you're saying for ancient writings?
Right. We have a lot of ancient writings that talk about the purposes of the pyramids.
Right, but there's no feature
and
of
the correlation with the stars and other like there's a grid in South Africa. There's the stones that Michael Tellinger is working with, and they line up on the same what is it? The same latitude or longitude, right? Yeah, they're in the same longitude, and so Tellinger's theory is that there's part of this energy grid that was global, just like we have a global grid. The ancients had a global grid because they were a global society, and we're getting more and more evidence that they have, they traveled around the globe. They had a global society that different races were in different places. It wasn't the modern story, just like they have the modern story of the Egyptologists. They have the modern story of how the world was discovered, but it was rediscovered. Go ahead.
Just that there's sight lines of all these megalithic sites that where you actually can see the rising of this constellation or that constellation on the solstices and equinoxes. And in the Sumerian writings, they explicitly say that this was showing which one of the great Anunnaki, these tall people from Nibiru, was the supreme god. They called them gods. There's people on Earth, and that the pyramid itself was where they had their master computers before there was a series of pyramid wars when Ninurta, the champion of Yahweh, Enlil, destroyed it. But before that, it was where they had all their master astronavigational equipment. Is what there's actual writing in Sumerian that talks about it.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, all those ideas are popular. Do you know that there's a correlation between the number of pirates and global warming? There's Wikipedia pages and everything about it, and there's a chart that shows the correlation between global warming and pirates. But it's a false correlation, even though it's very precise, because there's no causation between the two. So how
do you prove causation if you're not taking into consideration ancient texts that are saying the cause, why they built that? Where do we ever include causation?
Well, there's a lot of
causation.
Oh, you can find causation on a lot of things. There's a correlation, if you will, between the needle on your gas tank and how much gas is in your gas tank. The needle on your dash, there's a correlation between those two. That's a causation. If you put your hand on a hot stove, there's a correlation between that and pain. But that's the question. If just because something lines up doesn't mean that it was intended, and it also doesn't mean that it was considered to be significant. There's a
So where do you ever take anything into consideration to make any kind of conclusions if it's all just that type of logic,
Well, that's obviously, if you have a system approach, you can instead of looking for one A causes B, you want to see what the inputs and with inputs and with how the whole system functions, rather than to try to break it down into its component things. And so that if babies are born when the asphalt is soft, that still could tell you about how the whole system, maybe it has to do with something that's affecting both. So I think you need to look beyond just two variables. You have to see how entire systems are working.
That's the method used in the Orion correlation theory and by a lot of people that study the Great Pyramid. But if you use a scientific method, instead of increasing the variables, and in fact increasing the variables to every variable there is, including infinite time, every single measurement in the world, whatever anything lines up to, there's another method, and it's called the scientific method, where you want to reduce the number of variables, and it would increase the accuracy of your research. But it seems to be that for a Great Pyramid correlation, there's nothing to indicate a causation of an alignment. Something that would be nice would be a star chart or something like that. But just because something points to something does not validate a correlation.
There are definitely star charts in the Hyperion at Malta and Photos.
What part of the Great Pyramid is Malta?
Malta's in the Mediterranean.
Yes, I know.
That,
so if you pick, you're using every available variable on the entire Earth and in all time to corroborate a Great Pyramid correlation. But specifically to the pyramid, there is no evidence that indicates that any correlation was intended by the original builders.
Yeah, I think that your point's excellent in terms of this is not scientific a method at all. This is another another way of looking at things.
It is spiritual and it is a belief system. And if you want to have religion, that's wonderful. I am not going to disrespect your religion, but if your ideas are based on leaps of faith, then all you have to do is be upfront about it, and that's okay.
We all have belief systems. We believe that the Earth is round and that we're walking on solid ground. It's kind of consensus reality, and in some way, your hypothesis of how it got moved is the same type principle. You're kind of starting somewhere, believing something.
The scientific method works for a limited amount of things, but in existentialism, one of the things we think is that whatever is what is intended, whether it's conscious or unconscious. That's because there is a relationship that's a feedback loop, and it's another way of approaching. I agree. This is not scientific method, but it's a holistic method, a system approach.
Mm-hmm. What I like is that the Great Pyramid is mute testimony to the ancient geniuses, and it is fascinating that this structure, this pile of stones, generates, if you will, so much interest by so many people. I mean, it is a marvel of construction, and it is encased in mystery, and it is wonderful that everyone has got such diverse explanations for this, this pile of rocks. Isn't that amazing?
It certainly is. It's we're doing how many radio shows on it, Let's see.
Well, what it was, Belisarius said, as clear as mud, but it covered the ground, and the confusion made the world go round.
Yeah.
Yeah. So isn't if people, the more books have been written about the Great Pyramid than any other structure on Earth. So I just suggest to people, especially people that have their own ideas made up, question what you already consider to be irrefutable, and spread your wings and open your mind and read other books and new ideas about the Great Pyramid. If you went to college in the Middle Ages and you were taught a class about the Great Pyramid, they would tell you they would tell you it is a granary. And if you wrote down that it wasn't a granary, literal granary, then you would get the answer wrong. So ideas are evolving. We are in a new era, I think, right now of awakening for people to understand our distant past and to give options for the future and for people to live, a freer and safer life in a cleaner world. And I think with these alternative ideas and alternative technologies, not just about the Great Pyramid, but others. You see them, all the videos on YouTube about these little magnet motors and other things that people are, obviously they're working with no funding, in their garage. And, why can't those guys get funding? But if you could figure out
how... do. We had a magnet guy living with us, and they kept getting more and more funding, so they bought him out so he wouldn't go get the
right.
And they bought out the invention because it would eliminate fossil fuels. We see it over and over and over again.
Yeah, isn't it an amazing world? But I don't think that that's going to happen forever. I think that there's going to be a breakthrough somewhere, that'll open the floodgates to understanding so much of the world, and it's not going to be the same as it always has been. There's been revolutions of change and understanding throughout history, and I think we're on the precipice of another one of those, and it will be devastating to a lot of people, but it'll be freeing for so many more, and I'm excited about the future in a lot of ways, and I think it's going to be a better place.
I think your 3D printing is where you can make your own machines at home and do all is really going to help people do things at home without great finances behind them.
Oh yeah, it'll really increase innovation on a grassroots level, and it will help people make their own parts. People will be able to to control their own production, if you will. Instead of having to go down and buy a part to something, you can just make it and adapt it to fit your applications, like for just working on things around the house or anything. So yeah, that's a wonderful technology, those 3D printers. And we're trying to fund acquiring one of those for our nonprofit foundation. So people
have a couple more questions.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Zapid, once again, he's been firing questions. Have you heard of the work done with water by Victor Schauberger? And have you heard of Captain Bruce Cathy's work to do with the Earth grid? Victor Schauberger and on the water, and Captain Bruce Cathy's with the Earth grid.
Okay. The Earth grid, I'm not as familiar with on her research. Hopefully he'll send me a link through our email, which is at info@thepump.org. So have him send me an email. But Victor Schauberger is referenced in both of my books quite a bit. And we think that some of his technology was used specifically in the subterranean chamber, to operate the water pump. And the book describes Schauberger's technology that we think the ancients used, talks about that quite a bit. So yes, I'm familiar with Victor Schauberger's work and how it relates to the Great Pyramid water pumps.
And he asks also, has there been any known studies on tide and water usage in the pyramid?
Oh, gee, there's been studies about everything. I'm not sure about tidal or waves, because the Great Pyramid is pretty much high and dry. So, he can conduct his own research on that regard. The water level of the oceans have changed, through the millennia. So I'm sure someone has research and ideas about that. So do a word search on Google.
We have 10 minutes left. What would you like to tell our listeners in our last 10 minutes?
Oh, well, we've talked about a lot of ideas, different writings and that type of thing, different explanations of the Great Pyramid, but I just suggest to people, again, the responsibility rests on your own shoulders to conduct your own research, and don't just point a finger at some expert and say, I believe what he says. People need to do their own due diligence and read and find out. Don't believe everything you read. and get as many ideas as you can. And but our thrust, obviously, is the technology of the Great Pyramid, how that pyramid was assembled, and also how it was used on a technological level. And not to say anything about any other ideas of wars and kings and everything. There's people that really respond to understanding this technological marvel on a technological basis. You know, like if you want to understand how a car engine operates, you don't need to know about Henry Ford and his kids and who you know, or even where the car was built. You know, if you want to understand just the technology of a car, you know, you just read up about how engines work, how fuel, you know, is ignited and that type of thing, and how cylinders and the crankshaft work. And people respond to that. You know, there's a lot of people that aren't, you know, you don't need to find out about the King's List to understand the Great Pyramid on a technical level. So people, my experience is people like that, and there's just few researchers that discuss the Great Pyramid as a machine, and I think there will be more and more of that as time goes by, as opposed to discussing it in terms of religion or in terms of hieroglyphs or in terms of language or civilizations or gods or anything. You know, the gods didn't move the stones. People did. People just like us, you know, talk about variables. People are not a variable. We are the same and have been the same for thousands of years. And if the backs of people aren't strong enough now to move a 70-ton payload, then they weren't strong enough to do it in an effective way in ancient times. So also people like the idea that the ancient builders were geniuses instead of having a change of plan midway through the pyramid and to put the pharaoh's body in or whatever. You know, and these geniuses developed a fascinating technology to move the stones, and it was ultimately worth the effort. You know, they were better off afterwards than before. You know, and everyone believes that, but some people think they were better off because they paid a tax, or that they united the country somehow by this big stone structure. But we think that they were better off in a tangible way with this massive infrastructure. So, you know, those are the things, the approaches that I've taken with the Great Pyramid. And, you know, it's...
what about some of the other theories? Can you tell our listeners a little bit about some
the
of
other
theories? Like the other researchers are coming. You know, we have... I've lost everything in my head.
Christopher Dunn.
Chris Dunn and the other ones, yes. What are some of their theories?
Well, there's various theories. One is like the Great Pyramid death ray or whatever, some type of a weapon. Right. And but the main alternative idea of the Great Pyramid being some sort of a machine is Christopher Dunn's idea of a Giza power plant. And, you know, I suggest his books as well as more so than certainly Egyptologists' books. But to understand certainly a lot about the precision that cannot be accomplished using hand tools and that type of thing. So, you know, read his book.
Does his theory correlate with yours? Could it be both?
No, they're mutually exclusive. You know, they are certainly say that the passages and chambers were designed for you know, a machine purpose, but the purpose for his is different than the purpose for mine. But you know, people can read both books and his and mine and come up with you know, what they think or their own ideas. So.
Or it could be, or they could be both right. It could be multi-purposes.
It could possibly.
Doug found residues of HCl and hydrated zinc going into small chambers with an explosion of hydrogen, and evidence of that above. And other people have, especially in the Mexican pyramids, talked about, well, if you're going to run placer gold down the steps, you're going to be able to get your gold chunks. And so it seems that, and as far as the mathematics that are inherent in these structures, I guess you could probably do that with any detailed study. But what happens is people have studied the mathematics of the pyramid, and they've come up with all kinds of huge mathematical insights. But you probably could do that with studying a rock, the molecular structure of a rock, too.
Or an aircraft carrier, or the Bible. There is a whole correlation theory between the Great Pyramid and the Bible that was very popular in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Pyramidology, they called it. And all of these look it up, pyramidology. Cool. The Great Pyramid was like the Bible in stone, and they predicted when Jesus was going to be born, where he was born, correlate all these correlations that people come up with, but there's a problem. There's no causation that justifies a correlation that people come up with. People come up with correlations every day, but are they intended by the original builders? Well, that's another story. So people need to keep their eyes open, if you will, and not necessarily believe everything.
So there's no evidence or stories other than what we've been covered with the Sumerian stuff about the original builders in your research?
Well, there certainly were original builders, but who they are is not a focus of my research. Who assembled it. I didn't name names of the architect or anything like that. It is not the focus, again, of my research. My research is how it was built and also why it was built, not necessarily who did it. So that's
you
for
get
other...
a great insight as to why it was built, if you could find out who built it?
I would think not. You don't need to consider a president's list of the United States to understand how a hydroelectric dam was built.
Well, there's politics behind the dam.
There's politics about funding.
The politics of why they built because I'm still, looking at it was, what that would cost trillions of dollars if you build it today, right? Or billions, or their equivalent.
Yes.
So what was the politics that made them decide we're going to build this over anything else?
Well, I think
that's all I wonder.
Yeah, I'm not focusing on politics, but I do focus on motivation, and the motivation is that it improved their lives in a tangible way, just like the largest structure in the Nile Valley did, which is the High Aswan Dam. It cost a lot of money, but it provided irrigation and prosperity for millions of people.
Okay, we have one more minute. You want to repeat your website and your names, your books, and everything for our listeners?
Great. My books are Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid and also the Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine. Both are available from Amazon, and they are also available in Kindle ebook format, so you can be reading them today if you download them as Kindle ebooks. And our website is thepump.org. Please come by and visit us and send us an email.
And after the show, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me on your show.
Aloha. Thank you.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Who owns you? If you're not in control, then someone else is. Join me, Ivy West, for Voices on the Wind, Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern in Studio A. I discuss government, health, metaphysics, suppressed science, universal mysteries, little-known incredible facts, alternative energies, and even more than you can imagine.
There was blood on the wire.
Won't you join us on Revolution Radio Saturdays from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern for Voices on the Wind with me, Ivy West.
There are lives in the balance, people under fire, children at the cannons.
Because if your head's in the sand, your tail is a target.